The bright morning sun reflected off Orbital Terminal 7's massive glass windows as Captain James Wilson walked through the spaceport's main concourse. His crisp black uniform caught the light, pilot's wings gleaming on his chest. After 20 years of flying both Earth and space routes, the terminal felt like a second home. Today's flight was routine, Earth to Mars, carrying 300 passengers aboard the Stellar-class transport Morning Star. Wilson checked his tablet, reviewing pre-flight protocols while walking to the priority boarding line. His dark fingers moved quickly across the screen, confirming each safety measure. The boarding area buzzed with activity. Business people in suits mixed with families in comfortable travel wear, all waiting to board. Wilson noticed several beings from other worlds too, their tall, metallic forms towering over the human passengers. At the gate, Wilson presented his credentials to the automated system. The screen flashed green, confirming his status as the flight's backup pilot. Standard procedure required all licensed pilots to sit in first class, ready to help if needed. "Excuse me?" A sharp voice cut through the air. "There seems to be a mistake." Wilson turned to face a tall, silver-skinned being in expensive clothes. The creature's ID badge marked him as Ambassador Kren of the Dominion. Behind him stood two more Dominion officials, their metallic faces unreadable. "This seat," Kren pointed at Wilson's assigned spot, "is meant for important passengers. Surely you understand." The gate agent, a young woman named Rose, stepped forward. "Sir, Captain Wilson is a senior pilot." "Protocol requires protocol?" Kren's voice carried a hint of static, common when Dominion beings felt annoyed. "Do you know who I am?" "The Dominion provides your ships with AI systems. Without us, you wouldn't even leave Earth's atmosphere." Other passengers stopped to watch. Wilson felt their eyes on him, some sympathetic, others curious to see what would happen. He'd faced similar situations before, though usually on Earth, not in space. Wilson could have argued. His record spoke for itself: 3 Mars campaign medals, 15 years of perfect flights, and more emergency landings than any other pilot in the fleet. Instead, he smiled. "It's fine," he told Rose. "I can sit in economy." But Sir Rose started to protest. "Really, it's no problem." Wilson's voice stayed calm and professional. "Please give the ambassador my seat." Kren's metallic face showed no emotion, but his posture suggested satisfaction. The Dominion officials behind him relaxed slightly. As Wilson walked toward the economy section, he heard whispers from other passengers. Some seemed angry on his behalf, others disappointed that he hadn't fought back. But Wilson knew something they didn't in space flight. Like in life, position didn't matter as much as preparation. He found his new seat near the back, stored his bag, and settled in. Through the window, he could see the curve of Earth below, beautiful as always. Wilson pulled out his tablet again, continuing his pre-flight checks. Just because he sat in economy didn't mean he stopped being a pilot. Little did anyone know, this choice to move would soon prove more important than any seat assignment could show. The massive ship vibrated gently as it prepared for takeoff. Through the first-class window, Ambassador Kren watched Earth's spaceport grow smaller. His metallic fingers tapped against the armrest, the same seat he'd demanded from Captain Wilson. "Ambassador," one of his assistants spoke softly, "the human pilot's record shows significant achievements." Kren's internal processors were a sign of irritation. Achievements? Their entire species barely escaped their own planet. Without Dominion AI, they'd still be using chemical rockets. The truth about the Dominion's interest in human space travel remained classified. Few knew that the Galactic Council had been watching Earth's development with growing concern. Humans learned too fast, adapted too quickly, and worst of all, they could do things no AI could predict. In economy class, Wilson chatted quietly with his seatmate, an elderly man named Tom Baker. Tom had worked on the first Mars bases back before the Dominion arrived with their advanced technology. Things were different then, Tom explained, his weathered face animated. We had to think on our feet. No AI to help, just human instinct and training. Wilson nodded, understanding perfectly. He'd started flying in those days too, when pilots relied on skill instead of computers. The Dominion called it primitive, he called it real flying. Up in first class, Ambassador Kren received a coded message. His metallic face couldn't show emotion, but his assistants noticed his posture stiffen. "Sir?" one asked. "The Council is concerned," Kren spoke in their native language, a series of electronic pulses. "Human space presence is expanding too rapidly. Their unpredictability makes them dangerous. Should we execute Protocol 7? The assistant asked, referring to their backup plan. Kren considered. Protocol 7 would demonstrate Dominion's superiority by causing a minor ship malfunction, allowing their AI to save the day. Perfect propaganda to keep humans in their place. Proceed, Kren decided. Subtle enough to seem natural, dramatic enough to prove our point. Neither Kren nor his assistants noticed the small group of passengers in economy class. Besides Wilson and Tom, there were 3 other former Mars campaign veterans. They sat scattered throughout the section, watching the Dominion officials with practiced eyes. One of them, a quiet woman with graying hair, had already noticed something odd about the ship's engine vibration. Another, pretending to sleep, was actually counting the microseconds between hull integrity checks. They were off schedule. Wilson felt it too. 20 years of flying told him something wasn't right. He pulled out his tablet, reviewing the flight data. Everything looked normal on the surface, but years of experience told him otherwise. "Trouble?" Tom asked quietly. "Maybe," Wilson answered, his voice low. "But let's not worry yet. Sometimes the old pilot's instinct sees problems that aren't there." But they both knew that same instinct had saved countless lives during the Mars campaign. And right now, it was telling Wilson to stay alert. In first class, Ambassador Kren settled back, satisfied with his plans. Soon, everyone would see why the Dominion's AI should control human space travel. He had no idea he just started a chain of events that would prove exactly the opposite. The soft hum of the ship's engines filled the economy cabin as Captain Wilson studied his fellow passengers. What had started as a routine flight was becoming more interesting by the minute. 2 rows ahead, a woman with a military posture read a book about orbital mechanics. Her fingers occasionally tapped the armrest in sync with the engine's rhythm, a habit Wilson recognized from veteran pilots. Her name tag read Dr. Linda White, Orbital Engineering. Across the aisle, a broad-shouldered man pretended to sleep, but Wilson noticed his eyes moving beneath nearly closed lids, scanning the cabin systematically. A Mars campaign medal peeked out from under his collar. Master Sergeant Robert Stone. Tom Baker, still sitting beside Wilson, pulled out an old-fashioned notebook. "Quite a collection we've got here," he whispered. 5 Mars campaign veterans, all in economy. "What are the odds?" Wilson nodded slowly. The last veteran sat 3 rows back, Technical Officer Michael Grant, who'd specialized in emergency repair during solar storms. None of them were supposed to be on this flight. Up in first class, Ambassador Kren received another coded message. His metallic fingers twitched, betraying concern. The ship's AI had detected the unusual concentration of experienced space personnel in economy class. "Run background checks," he ordered his assistants. "Why are these humans here?" The answers came back quickly. Dr. White, design manual override systems for the Mars bases. Master Sergeant Stone, survived 3 emergency landings during solar storms. Technical Officer Grant, wrote the manual on non-AI emergency procedures. "Sir," one assistant reported, they were all originally booked on different flights. Each changed their ticket within the last 24 hours. In economy, the veterans maintained their casual poses, but subtle glances passed between them. They'd all felt the slight power fluctuation 20 minutes ago. All noticed a minor deviation in life support cycling. Wilson checked his tablet again. The ship's AI reported everything normal, but his experienced eye caught the patterns. Someone was preparing to demonstrate something, and he had a feeling he knew what. "Tom," he whispered, "remember Emergency Protocol 23 from the campaign?" Tom's eyes widened slightly. Protocol 23 had saved hundreds of lives when the first AI systems failed during solar storms. "They wouldn't dare," he whispered back. "Not with civilian passengers." "They might," Wilson replied, "if they wanted to prove a point about human dependence on AI." Dr. White caught Wilson's eye and nodded slightly. "She'd figured it out too." Master Sergeant Stone shifted in his seat, hand casually moving to the emergency manual override panel near his armrest. Technical Officer Grant began typing something on his personal device. They'd all survived the Mars campaign, when human skill and instinct overcame AI limitations. If the Dominion planned to teach humanity a lesson about dependency, they'd chosen the wrong flight to demonstrate it. As the ship continued its journey toward Mars, two forces prepared for confrontation, one relying on advanced AI, the other on human experience and adaptability. The question wasn't if something would happen, but when. The first warning sign came 3 hours into the flight. The ship's lights flickered briefly so quick most passengers didn't notice. But in economy class, 5 pairs of experienced eyes narrowed with concern. Captain Wilson watched the main cabin display showing their position relative to the sun. His years of experience spotted it immediately. They were entering an unstable solar region. He glanced at his tablet, but the ship's AI still reported all systems normal. Up in first class, Ambassador Kren received urgent data. The solar activity readings were far higher than predicted. Their carefully planned demonstration was about to become dangerously real. "Sir," his assistant's electronic voice crackled with static, "solar radiation levels are exceeding safety parameters. The AI's predictive models are failing." The ship shuddered. In the cockpit, the main pilot, a younger man trained primarily on AI systems, started seeing red warning indicators. The Dominion's advanced computers were struggling to compensate for the increasing solar interference. Dr. Linda White quietly unbuckled her seatbelt and moved toward the emergency equipment locker. Master Sergeant Stone was already reviewing the manual override procedures on his personal device. Technical Officer Grant had his radiation monitoring equipment out. "It's not like the Dominion to make this kind of mistake," Tom Baker whispered to Wilson. "Solar storm predictions are usually their specialty." Wilson nodded grimly. "Unless they wanted to prove something." He paused, checking the latest readings. "But this storm. It's bigger than anything they could have planned." The ship rocked violently. Overhead bins rattled. Several passengers gasped. The cabin lights flickered again, staying dim this time. In the cockpit, the main pilot's voice came over the crew channel, "AI systems experiencing multiple failures. Backup systems not responding. Navigation computers offline." Ambassador Kren's metallic face couldn't show fear, but his assistants detected his internal systems racing. This was beyond their demonstration plan. The solar storm was overwhelming their most advanced technology. The ship lurched again. Warning sirens blared. The main pilot's voice returned, now tight with stress, "Mayday, mayday. This is Flight 23-7. We have complete AI system failure. Navigation compromised. Requesting emergency assistance." Wilson looked at his fellow veterans. Each nodded slightly. They were ready. Years of Mars campaign experience had prepared them for exactly this type of situation. When technology failed, human skill and instinct remained. Before anyone could move, the ship's gravity shifted dramatically. Passengers screamed. Loose items flew through the cabin. The main pilot's voice came one last time before communications went dead, "All systems down. I've never flown without AI assistance." In economy class, Captain James Wilson unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. 20 years of manual flight experience had taught him one crucial lesson: Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. It was time to show the Dominion what humans could really do. Chaos erupted throughout the ship as the Dominion's advanced AI systems continued to fail. Emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across frightened faces. In first class, Ambassador Kren's metallic body vibrated with increasing frequency, a sign of severe distress. Impossible, he transmitted to his assistants in electronic pulses. Our systems are the most advanced in the galaxy. They cannot fail. But fail they did. One by one, the ship's automated systems shut down. Life support switched to basic backup. Navigation computers went dark. Even the artificial gravity became unstable, causing passengers to grip their seats tightly. The Dominion officials frantically tried to restart their systems. Their silvery fingers flew over control panels, entering override codes and emergency protocols. Nothing worked. The solar storm had grown far beyond their AI's ability to handle. "Sir," one assistant reported, "human vital signs throughout the ship are reaching critical levels. The radiation shielding is operating at 20% capacity." In economy class, the veterans sprang into action. Dr. Linda White pulled out old-style radiation meters from her bag, technology that didn't rely on AI. Master Sergeant Stone began distributing emergency breathing apparatus, while Technical Officer Grant worked on stabilizing the backup power systems. Tom Baker turned to Wilson. "The main shield generators run on Dominion tech, but there's a manual backup system. Ancient stuff, from before they arrived. Still installed because of safety regulations." Wilson nodded, already moving. He memorized the ship's layout before takeoff, another old habit from his Mars campaign days. The manual override panel was located near the engine section, but reaching it would mean crossing the unstable gravity zones. The ship lurched violently. More screams filled the cabin. A child started crying somewhere in the darkness. The Dominion's perfect technology, their pride and power, was crumbling around them. Ambassador Kren watched helplessly as his own systems began to glitch. The solar radiation was affecting even their personal shielding. For the first time in his diplomatic career, he felt something humans called fear. Through the windows, space itself seemed angry. Solar flares stretched across the void like fiery fingers. The ship's hull groaned under the strain. Without AI navigation, they were drifting directly into the heart of the storm. "One more system failure," Technical Officer Grant announced grimly, "and we lose life support completely." In that moment, as panic threatened to overwhelm the passengers, Captain James Wilson's voice cut through the chaos. Clear. Calm. Confident. "Ladies and gentlemen," he projected across the cabin, "I know these systems. I flew before AI existed. We all did." He gestured to his fellow veterans. "Trust us. Humans have faced worse and survived." The passengers fell silent, hope replacing fear in their eyes. Even Ambassador Kren turned to listen. The Dominion's technology had failed. Now it was humanity's turn to show what they could do. Captain Wilson moved through the ship with practiced efficiency, years of experience guiding each step. The unstable gravity made walking difficult, but his muscle memory from Mars campaign training kicked in. "Dr. White, take control of life support systems," he ordered. "Stone, help me get to the manual override. Grant, stabilize our power grid. Tom, coordinate with the passengers." The veterans moved instantly, their bodies remembering drills from years ago. The Dominion officials watched in stunned silence as these supposedly primitive humans worked with smooth precision. Ambassador Kren's internal systems registered increasing distress as Wilson passed first class. "You can't possibly," he began. "With all due respect, Ambassador," Wilson cut him off, "this isn't about politics anymore. It's about survival." The main pilot, young and AI dependent, sat frozen at the controls. Wilson placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Take a break, son. Watch and learn." Master Sergeant Stone reached the manual override panel first, his military training evident in every movement. Together, he and Wilson began the complex process of switching to manual control. Just like simulator training, Wilson muttered, his fingers dancing across the ancient backup controls. Day 1 Basics. Feel the ship, don't just read the numbers. In the passenger cabin, Dr. White had already restored partial life support using old emergency protocols. Grant's expertise with power systems kept essential functions running. Tom Baker moved among the passengers, his calm voice reassuring frightened civilians. The ship shuddered again, but this time Wilson felt something different. Without AI interpretation, he could sense the vessel's true responses. His hands moved instinctively, adjusting thrusters and stabilizers. "Sir," Stone reported, "manual controls responding. We've got about 40% power to work with." Wilson nodded, his focus absolute. The solar storm raged outside, but now he could feel its patterns. 20 years of experience told him where to find the gaps, the safe passages through the chaos. Ambassador Cran watched in disbelief as Wilson guided the ship using nothing but human instinct and skill. The ambassador's advanced sensors couldn't make sense of the storm, yet this human somehow understood it. "Impossible," Cran whispered. "Our simulations show survival requires at least level 9 AI processing." Wilson allowed himself a small smile. "Sometimes, Ambassador, the best computer is the human brain. We evolved to recognize patterns, to feel our way through chaos. No AI can match millions of years of survival instinct." The ship began to stabilize as Wilson found their path through the storm. His fellow veterans worked in perfect sync, their old training creating a symphony of human efficiency. In that moment, the Dominion's greatest fear came true. Humans weren't just adapting to advanced technology, they were proving they could surpass it. Wilson's steady hands guided the ship through waves of solar radiation, while Ambassador Cran and his assistants watched in growing amazement. The Dominion officials had never seen pure manual control executed with such precision. "Hull temperature dropping," Dr. White called out. "Life support stabilizing under manual protocols." Technical Officer Grant worked furiously at the power distribution panel, rerouting emergency power to critical systems. Old school circuitry holding steady. The ship's original pilot sat beside Wilson, watching intently as the veteran demonstrated real space flight. No AI assistance, no computer predictions, just pure skill and instinct. "See that flare pattern?" Wilson explained calmly. "Solar storms have rhythms. AI tries to calculate them mathematically, but humans can feel them." Ambassador Cran's assistants frantically analyzed the situation, their processors struggling to understand how this was possible. Their most advanced predictions showed a 99.8% chance of catastrophic failure without AI guidance. Yet here they were, watching a human pilot thread their way through the impossible. "Ambassador," one assistant transmitted privately, "the Council must be informed. These humans, they're not just surviving without our technology. They're excelling." Cran's metallic frame vibrated with concern. The Dominion's entire strategy relied on humanity's dependence on their AI systems. This demonstration of independence threatened decades of careful planning. "New radiation spike approaching," Stone warned from his station. 15 seconds. Wilson nodded, feeling the ship's responses through the manual controls. "Everyone brace." The wave hit hard. Warning lights flashed across every panel. But Wilson's hands moved with practiced grace, adjusting their course microscopically, riding the energy like a surfer on a wave. In the passenger cabin, Tom Baker organized the civilians into safer positions, using techniques developed during the Mars campaign. The passengers' fear had transformed into astonishment as they witnessed human capability at its finest. "Impossible," Cran muttered again, his electronic voice crackling. "With static. Our simulations. Our predictions." "That's your problem, Ambassador," Wilson replied without taking his eyes off the controls. "You tried to predict the unpredictable. Humans don't predict, we adapt." The truth of those words hung in the air as the ship continued its dance through the solar storm, guided by human hands and human hearts, proving that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. The Dominion's perfect world of AI control was crumbling, replaced by something they feared far more: human potential unleashed. The ship's manual control room hummed with focused energy as Captain Wilson orchestrated their survival. His fellow veterans had transformed the space into something from the early days of space flight, all analog readings and human intuition. Navigation calculations complete, Dr. White announced, using paper and pencil. Lunar Base Alpha is our best chance. We're too far from Mars, and Earth's radiation belt is too active. Wilson nodded, feeling the ship's vibrations through his hands on the controls. The Dominion's gleaming technology lay dark and useless around them, while human ingenuity kept them alive. Power levels at 35% and holding, Grant reported from his station. The old circuits are performing better than expected. Master Sergeant Stone kept watch on the radiation levels using basic Geiger counters. Next wave approaching. Bigger than the last. Ambassador Kren observed silently, his metallic features reflecting the emergency lights. His internal processors struggled to comprehend how these humans managed what his civilization's most advanced AI couldn't. Wilson's hands moved smoothly across the controls, adjusting their course through the storm. Every movement was deliberate, guided by experience rather than algorithms. "You feel that?" he asked the young main pilot, who watched in awe. "The ship tells you what it needs. No computer can replace that connection." The massive solar wave struck, battering the ship with radiation. But this time, they were ready. Wilson rode the energy, using its force to help propel them towards safety. The technique was ancient, developed by the first space pilots before AI existed. "Impossible maneuver," one of Kren's assistants transmitted. "Our simulations show a 0% survival rate for that approach." Yet survive they did. The ship emerged from the wave intact, their course now perfectly aligned with Lunar Base Alpha. The manual systems, considered primitive by Dominion standards, proved more resilient than any AI. Sometimes, Wilson said to no one in particular, the simplest solution is the best solution. In the passenger cabin, Tom Baker had organized an old-style relay system, passing vital information without depending on computer networks. The civilians began to understand what their ancestors had achieved before the Dominion arrived. Ambassador Kren's worldview was crumbling. Everything his civilization believed about human dependence on AI was being proved wrong, minute by minute. The path to Lunar Base Alpha lay ahead, visible through the forward windows. They weren't safe yet, but human skill had given them a fighting chance. The final approach to Lunar Base Alpha became a master class in human piloting skill. Captain Wilson's hands remained steady on the manual controls as the battered ship limped toward safety. "Final radiation barrier ahead," Stone reported. "We'll have to time this perfectly." The moon loomed large in their view, its surface scarred and beautiful. Lunar Base Alpha's landing beacons pulsed steadily, guiding them home if they could reach it. "Power reserves at 15%, Grant called out. "One shot at this, Captain." Wilson nodded, his focus absolute. The landing sequence without AI assistance would require perfect coordination from every veteran on board. One mistake would mean disaster. "Dr. White, prepare for manual landing gear deployment," Wilson ordered. "Stone, monitor hull integrity." "Grant, give me everything you can for the final burn." Ambassador Kren watched in tense silence as the humans executed their approach. His civilization had forgotten these skills generations ago, surrendering them to AI control. The ship shuddered as they hit the radiation barrier. Warning lights flashed across every panel. Wilson's hands danced across the controls, making split-second adjustments that no computer could calculate. "Hull temperature critical," Stone shouted. "Landing gear deployed," Dr. White confirmed. "Manual brake systems responding." The surface of the moon filled their view now. Wilson could see the landing pad, knew they were coming in too fast by normal standards. But these weren't normal circumstances. "Brace for landing," he commanded over the ship's speakers. "This will be rough." The ship screamed in protest as Wilson executed a maneuver that violated every AI safety protocol but would save their lives. He used the moon's gravity like a slingshot, bleeding off speed while maintaining control. The landing pad rushed up to meet them. Wilson's hands moved with inhuman speed, each motion precise, each adjustment perfect. 20 years of experience compressed into 30 seconds of pure skill. Impact. The ship bounced once, twice, skidding across the pad. Emergency foam deployed automatically. Then, finally, stillness. And the sudden quiet. Ambassador Kren's electronic voice broke the silence. "How? How did you know that would work?" Wilson released the controls, his hands steady. "We didn't. But humans are good at doing impossible things. It's what we do best." Through the viewport, emergency crews were already approaching. They had done it, proved that human skill could triumph where AI failed. The emergency crews of Lunar Base Alpha moved swiftly across the landing pad, securing the damaged ship. Inside, passengers began to stir, realizing they had actually survived what should have been impossible. Captain Wilson worked methodically, shutting down systems and ensuring everyone's safety. The other veterans helped passengers exit through emergency hatches while medical teams waited outside. Ambassador Kren stood in the ship's doorway, his metallic form catching the harsh lunar light. For the first time in his diplomatic career, he seemed unsure of himself. "0 casualties," Dr. White reported, checking the final passenger manifest. "Not even a serious injury. Just some bruises and shock." The base commander, an older woman who'd seen her share of emergencies, approached Wilson. "That landing?" She shook her head in amazement. "Our instruments showed it was mathematically impossible." "Mathematics can't measure human determination," Wilson replied simply. Technical teams swarmed the ship, amazed at how the old manual systems had performed. The Dominion's advanced technology lay dead, destroyed by the solar storm, while simple human engineering had saved the day. Grant and Stone worked with the base's engineers, explaining how they bypassed the AI systems. The younger technicians listened intently, suddenly interested in these outdated methods. Ambassador Kren's assistants transmitted their findings to the Dominion Council. The data was undeniable. Humans had succeeded where AI had failed completely. The implications would shake their civilization's core beliefs. "Captain Wilson," Kren's electronic voice carried across the landing pad, "I owe you and your species an apology. I was wrong." Wilson turned to face the ambassador. The same man who demanded his first-class seat now stood humbled before him. "It's not about being wrong or right, Ambassador," Wilson said. "It's about understanding that different approaches have different strengths. Technology and human intuition work best together, not in competition." The moon's harsh landscape stretched out behind them, a reminder of what humans could achieve. They'd reached this place long before AI, driven by nothing but courage and determination. Lunar Base Alpha's lights glowed steadily in the eternal night, a beacon of human perseverance, now witness to another chapter in humanity's surprising story. The news spread quickly through the solar system: an impossible landing, a ship saved by human skill when the most advanced AI had failed. In Lunar Base Alpha's main conference room, Captain Wilson faced a sea of reporters and diplomats. Ambassador Kren stood at the podium, his metallic form gleaming under the lights. "The Dominion Council has received my full report," he announced. "What happened?" "On Flight 23-7 forces us to reevaluate everything we believed about human capabilities." The assembled crowd murmured as Kren continued, "Our civilization chose pure technology over instinct generations ago. We thought it made us superior. Today proves we were wrong." Security footage from the flight played on large screens, showing Wilson and the veterans working in perfect harmony. The manual landing, previously thought impossible, drew gasps from the audience. "The truth we feared," Kren admitted, "is that human unpredictability, their ability to improvise, makes them uniquely qualified for space exploration. Their neural pathways process chaos in ways our most advanced AI cannot match. Dr. White presented the technical data, showing how human intuition had found patterns in the solar storm that AI missed completely. Grant and Stone demonstrated the manual systems that had saved them. Look at their history, Tom Baker added. Humans reached the moon with computers less powerful than today's watches. They survived space disasters with slide rules and gut instinct. That adaptability is coded into their DNA. Wilson sat quietly, watching the Dominion officials process this new reality. Their perfect world of AI control was crumbling, replaced by something more powerful: the combination of human instinct and advanced technology. This changes everything, Kren concluded. The Dominion must recognize that true advancement lies not in replacing human capability, but in enhancing it. As the implications sank in, Wilson thought about that first-class seat he'd given up. Sometimes, he realized, the best view of history wasn't from the front of the ship, it was from wherever you could make the biggest difference. 6 months after the historic emergency landing, Captain James Wilson stood at the podium of the newly established Human Dominion Space Academy. The massive facility, built on Mars, represented a dramatic shift in interstellar relations. Today marks a new era, Wilson addressed the first class of mixed human and Dominion students. We're not here to choose between human instinct and AI technology. We're here to master both. The lecture hall was filled with faces both human and metallic. Ambassador Kren, now the Academy's co-director, sat in the front row. The incident had transformed him from a skeptic to humanity's strongest advocate in the Dominion Council. The solar storm incident taught us all something valuable, Wilson continued. Technology can fail. Instinct can fail. But together, they create something greater than the sum of their parts. The curriculum he designed merged the best of both worlds. Dominion instructors taught advanced AI systems while human veterans shared their experience with manual operations. Every student learned to handle both. Dr. White headed the emergency response department, teaching the art of improvisation. Grant and Stone ran practical simulations, showing how human creativity could enhance AI efficiency. Tom Baker taught the history of space exploration, reminding everyone how far they'd come. In orbit above, ships now carried both AI systems and manual controls. Every pilot, human or Dominion, trained in both. The age of rivalry had ended, replaced by mutual respect and understanding. Wilson looked at his first-class photo: humans and Dominion beings learning together, each bringing their unique strengths to the table. That moment in economy class, what seemed like a humiliation, had sparked a revolution in space travel. Our future lies not in proving who's better, Wilson concluded, but in combining our strengths. Together, we'll reach stars that neither of us could reach alone. The applause that followed, both human hands and metallic appendages, echoed through the Academy halls, a sound of unity, of progress, of a future brighter than either civilization had imagined alone.